The grand palace of Belchester stood silent under the morning sky. The once lively courtyard was now calm, covered with fresh flowers and ribbons placed by people from across the kingdom. Their beloved Queen Helena had passed away only a week ago, and the air still carried a heavy feeling of sadness. Everyone in the palace walked quietly, showing respect to the woman who had led the nation with kindness and wisdom for more than 50 years. Among the royal guards who stood watch every day was Thomas, a loyal man who had served Queen Helena since his youth. He respected her deeply and had promised to protect her family and her legacy, no matter what happened after her death. He remembered her soft voice telling him one day, "Thomas, when I am gone, make sure my house stays honest." Those words never left his mind. Inside the palace halls, whispers had begun to spread. Lady Camilla, the second wife of Prince Rowan, had returned from a long absence. She came dressed in rich silks and carried herself with confidence that many found unusual during a time of mourning. Servants bowed as she passed, but some could not help noticing the cold look in her eyes. She had not always been close to Queen Helena, and many remembered how distant she had seemed from the royal duties. Thomas watched her carefully as she walked past the hall where portraits of old queens hung. Her eyes lingered on the golden frames and sparkling jewels that decorated the paintings. Something about her expression made Thomas uneasy. It was not grief, but rather curiosity and calculation. Later that afternoon, Camilla called a meeting with the palace staff. She announced that certain parts of the late queen's private rooms would now be under her care. The queen would have wanted her things to stay in the family, she said, her tone calm but firm. As Prince Rowan's wife, I must make sure her belongings are kept properly. The staff looked uncertain. One of the older maids, Martha, spoke softly. My lady, the queen had left a list of personal items to be sent to the Royal Museum and others to her grandchildren. The royal archivist has it. Camilla smiled politely. I understand, Martha, but I will decide what remains in the palace. The family must keep its treasures close. Her words made several attendants exchange worried glances. The queen's wishes had been clear, yet Camilla seemed to be rewriting them. Thomas, who stood near the door, heard everything. His chest tightened as he remembered the queen's request for honesty and fairness. He stayed silent for the moment, knowing his duty was to observe first. That night, while the palace slept, Camilla and two of her attendants entered the late queen's private chamber. Thomas was on night watch near the corridor and saw the flicker of candlelight through the keyhole. He stepped closer, quietly listening. Inside, Camilla was giving instructions to remove a few boxes. Her attendants carefully lifted them, but one box fell open, revealing a pearl crown and a letter sealed with the queen's mark. Camilla quickly closed the box. Be careful, she whispered sharply. These will go to my study. I will handle them personally. Thomas frowned. The queen's personal crown was not to be touched until the new king gave orders. He felt a deep discomfort. Still, he could not act without permission. He stood firm, planning to report the matter to the head of the royal guard in the morning. By sunrise, the palace was buzzing again. Servants moved quietly and guards took their posts. Thomas went straight to Commander Harris, his superior, and explained what he had seen. The commander listened carefully. We must be cautious, he said. The queen's will is still being reviewed by the council. We cannot accuse anyone without proof. Thomas nodded, though unease stayed in his heart. He decided to watch more closely. Over the next few days, Camilla continued to act as if she owned the palace. She held small gatherings with her family, giving tours of the royal halls. She even had the queen's favorite dining room redecorated, saying it looked too old-fashioned. The servants followed orders quietly, but the respect once shown to her began to fade. Many whispered behind closed doors that she had forgotten the mourning period and was chasing influence. Prince Rowan, a kind but quiet man, seemed unaware of his wife's behavior. He spent most of his time in his study, writing letters and meeting with advisors. When Thomas saw him once in the corridor, he hesitated but finally spoke. Your Highness, forgive me for speaking, but some of the late queen's possessions are being moved without proper notice. Prince Rowan looked tired. Lady Camilla only wishes to preserve my mother's memory, he replied softly. Do not worry, Thomas. All is well. Thomas bowed but left with a heavy heart. He could see the prince was troubled but unwilling to confront his wife. The loyalty he had sworn to the queen now felt heavier than ever. He knew he could not stand by if her legacy was being changed for personal gain. One evening, as rain poured outside, Thomas noticed a small carriage arriving quietly at the side gate. Two of Camilla's attendants were loading chests into it. When Thomas asked what was happening, one of them nervously replied that these were old palace decorations being sent for cleaning. But Thomas had seen those boxes before. They were the same ones from the Queen's chamber. Without wasting time, he followed protocol and signaled the gate guard to halt the carriage. "Open it," he ordered calmly. Inside the chests were golden candle stands, royal silverware, and the Queen's pearl crown. The guard gasped, knowing these were sacred royal items. Thomas immediately sealed the carriage and sent a message to Commander Harris. Within minutes, senior guards gathered in the courtyard. Rain soaked their uniforms as they stood in silence, waiting for instructions. Camilla soon appeared, furious and demanding an explanation. "How dare you stop my carriage?" she said sharply. "These items belong to the royal family, and I am part of it." Thomas bowed slightly but replied firmly, "My lady, these items were part of Queen Helena's private collection. No one is allowed to remove them until the council declares their rightful place." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of wrongdoing?" Thomas remained calm. "I am only protecting the Queen's command as she wished." The commander arrived and ordered the items to be returned to the Queen's chamber. Camilla turned away angrily, her pride hurt in front of the guards. She walked back into the palace, her gown brushing against the wet ground, her silence louder than her words. The guards resumed their positions and Thomas stayed near the gates, watching the carriage roll away empty. That night, as thunder echoed over Belchester Palace, Thomas looked up at the grand towers. He thought of Queen Helena's gentle smile and her promise that honesty would always protect the crown. He did not know what would come next, but deep down, he felt that this was only the beginning of a greater test for the royal guard and the kingdom itself. The next morning, the palace was filled with quiet tension. Servants whispered softly in corners and the guards spoke little. Everyone had heard about what happened at the gate the night before. Lady Camilla had tried to move the late queen's belongings and the royal guard had stopped her. No one dared to speak loudly, but curiosity spread through the corridors like wind. Thomas stood in the courtyard, watching the morning sun shine over the palace walls. His uniform was still damp from the rain, but his heart felt calm. He knew he had done the right thing. Yet he also knew this would not be the end of the matter. Lady Camilla was proud and ambitious. She would not forget the humiliation she faced before the guards. Inside the royal dining room, Prince Rowan sat at the long table, staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold. Camilla entered quietly, her steps firm and graceful. She looked at her husband with a composed smile. "My dear," she said softly, "it seems your guards are getting too bold. Last night they stopped my carriage and accused me of stealing." Prince Rowan sighed and placed his cup down. "They are only doing their duty. Mother's possessions are still under the council's review. You should not have moved them without permission." Camilla's expression hardened. "I am your wife. Does that not give me any right in this house? Everything here belongs to the royal family and I am part of it." Rowan rubbed his forehead. "You are part of the family, but there are rules. Mother left her wishes clearly. We must respect them." Camilla turned away, her eyes fixed on the golden frames along the wall. "Sometimes rules must bend for the sake of the living," she murmured. "The Queen is gone now. It is time for the next chapter." Thomas, standing at his post near the dining hall, heard fragments of their conversation. He could sense the tension between them. He respected Prince Rowan deeply, but he also feared that the prince's gentle nature might allow Camilla to take advantage. Later that day, the royal council gathered in the old library to review Queen Helena's final letters. The head archivist, Sir Bennet, was a careful man with thin glasses and silver hair. He opened a wooden box that held the Queen's sealed papers. Among them was one envelope marked with the royal crest and the words, "For my loyal guard, Thomas." The room fell silent when Bennet read it aloud. Thomas was called into the library. His hands were steady, but his heart beat fast. He had never expected to receive a personal letter from the Queen. Sir Bennet handed it to him with respect. "This letter was written 2 days before her passing," he said. "It seems she trusted you with something important." Thomas carefully broke the seal and began to read. The Queen's handwriting was delicate but strong. "My dear Thomas, if this reaches you, it means I have left this world. You have served me with loyalty beyond words. There is something I must tell you. Within the blue chest in my private chamber lies a small diary. It contains the record of my true will, not the one given to the council, but one that reveals the real heir to my personal estate. Guard it well until the council confirms it. Do not let it fall into the wrong hands. With faith, Helena. Thomas folded the letter carefully. His chest tightened with a mix of pride and worry. The Queen had trusted him with a secret. He realized now that her final wishes might be different from what the council had seen. Sir Bennet looked at him seriously. You must protect whatever the Queen has mentioned. The diary could be important. Thomas bowed. I will, sir. That evening he went to the Queen's private chamber and searched for the blue chest. It was hidden behind a curtain near the window. The lock was old but still strong. He used the royal key provided by the archivist and opened it slowly. Inside was a small leather-bound diary with golden edges. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. He placed it inside a sealed envelope and locked it in the royal guard's safe. But Camilla, who had been walking by the corridor, noticed him leaving the chamber. Her curiosity immediately grew. She waited until he disappeared and then called her maid. Follow that guard, she ordered quietly. Find out what he took from the Queen's room. The maid nodded and followed Thomas from a distance. Later that night she returned to report what she saw, the guard entering the royal guard office and locking something in a box. Camilla smiled faintly. So the old Queen left more secrets, she said. Let us see what she tried to hide from me. The next morning, Thomas was called to the main hall by Commander Harris. Thomas, the commander said, the prince has ordered all items from the Queen's private chambers to be listed and verified again. Lady Camilla says there might be missing documents. Thomas froze for a second but quickly composed himself. Everything is secure, sir. I have followed the Queen's letter exactly. Harris nodded. I trust you, but be cautious. Not everyone around here wishes to keep the Queen's peace. That evening, Thomas decided to visit the Queen's old gardener, an elderly man named Oliver, who had served in the palace for decades. He often spoke wisely about the royal family and knew many hidden stories. When Thomas showed him the Queen's letter, Oliver's eyes softened. She trusted you because she saw your heart, he said. The Queen once told me that people will show their true face after her passing. Maybe she knew trouble would come, Thomas sighed. I only wished to protect what she wanted. But Lady Camilla grows stronger every day. Oliver nodded. Then protect the diary with your life. It might be the key to truth when the time comes. Meanwhile, Camilla was not idle. She arranged a small meeting with a few advisors who favored her. She spoke softly but with confidence. The Queen's guards are hiding documents, she said. They might change the rightful distribution of the royal estate. We must act before lies spread. Her words planted seeds of doubt in the minds of those present. Within hours, whispers spread across the palace that Thomas was holding something secret without the council's knowledge. That night, when Thomas returned to his post, he noticed 2 guards watching him closely. He greeted them politely, but their eyes followed him as if expecting him to make a mistake. He realized then that Camilla had already begun her silent battle. At midnight, when the palace lights dimmed, Thomas checked the safe once more. The diary was still there, untouched. He placed the Queen's letter beside it and locked the box tightly. Then he sat by the window, watching the moonlight touch the royal towers. He thought of the Queen's kind face and her last words to him. He knew his loyalty might soon be tested beyond duty, and though he could not see the future, he felt in his heart that the coming days would decide not only his fate, but also the true honor of the royal house. The morning sun rose over Belchester Palace, lighting the tall windows and shining on the marble floors. The palace looked peaceful from the outside, but inside, quiet storms were forming. Servants moved quickly through the corridors, avoiding long conversations. Everyone could feel that something was changing. Lady Camilla had become more active, giving new orders almost every day, and some of them went against the usual royal traditions. Thomas, the loyal guard, stood near the Queen's old chamber as usual. His mind was calm on the surface, but inside, he carried the weight of a secret that could shake the palace. The Queen's diary was still locked in the royal guard's safe, untouched since the night he found it. Only he and Commander Harris knew about it, and both had agreed to wait until the council's next meeting before revealing it. But the walls of the palace had ears. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps, and by now, Camilla had learned that a hidden diary might exist, one that contained the Queen's real wishes. That morning, She entered the library where Sir Bennet, the royal archivist, was working. She gave him a warm smile. "Good morning, Sir Bennet," she said softly. "You have served this family well. I must thank you for your loyalty to the late Queen." Bennet bowed respectfully. "It was my honor, my lady." She sat down across from him and continued in a calm voice. "I heard that the Queen left some personal notes, perhaps a diary or something private. I only ask because it is my duty to keep the family's memory safe." Bennet hesitated. He was a man of honesty, and he knew that Camilla's intentions were not pure. "I am not aware of all the details, my lady," he said carefully. "The council will handle every document according to the Queen's will." Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course. I only wish to help," she replied. But deep inside she felt anger. She knew he was hiding something. Later that day she met with her maid Clara and whispered her plan. "We must find that diary before anyone else," she said. "If the Queen left something that changes my position, it cannot see the light." Clara looked nervous but nodded. "Yes, my lady. But the guard named Thomas watches over it day and night. He is very loyal." Camilla smiled coldly. "Everyone has a weakness, Clara. We will find his." Meanwhile, Thomas was walking through the palace gardens with Oliver, the old gardener. The fresh air and the sound of birds helped clear his thoughts. The Queen's letter mentioned that her diary would reveal the true heir to her personal estate, Thomas said quietly. "I fear Lady Camilla will not stop until she gets it." Oliver nodded slowly. "The Queen must have written something important. She once told me that her estate should go to the one who truly values kindness over power. Maybe she meant Prince Rowan, or perhaps even someone else." Thomas thought about that for a moment. The Queen had always believed in fairness and honesty. If her diary contained something that changed the balance of the royal inheritance, it would explain why Camilla wanted it so much. That night, the palace felt different. The lights in the hallways were dimmer than usual, and a strange stillness filled the air. Thomas walked his usual patrol route, stopping by the guardroom every few minutes. Everything seemed normal until he heard a faint sound near the corridor that led to the archives. He followed the sound quietly and saw two figures moving in the shadows. He stepped closer and recognized them as Clara and another servant. They were holding small lamps and trying to open a door. "Stop right there," Thomas said firmly. The two froze. Clara turned slowly, her hands trembling. "We were just cleaning, sir," she said quickly. Thomas looked at the lock. It had been damaged. "Cleaning in the middle of the night?" he asked calmly. "Go back to your rooms." They left quickly without another word. Thomas locked the door again and reported the incident to Commander Harris. The commander frowned after hearing the story. "Camilla must be searching for the diary," he said. "You did well stopping them. Keep your eyes open." The next morning, Camilla appeared in the royal court wearing a deep blue gown. Her expression was calm, but her voice carried quiet anger. "I wish to speak to the commander of the guard," she said before everyone. "Last night my servants were treated unfairly. They were accused of breaking into rooms they were allowed to clean." Commander Harris stood tall. "My lady, they were found near the archives at midnight. That is not part of their duty." Camilla's tone sharpened. "You question my staff as if they are thieves. Are you accusing me of dishonesty?" The room grew silent. Prince Rowan looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Thomas stood quietly behind his commander, his face unreadable. Finally, Harris replied calmly, "No one accuses you, my lady. We are only following palace rules." Camilla smiled faintly. "Then I hope those rules apply to everyone, including guards who hide things from the royal family." Her words made everyone look toward Thomas. The air felt heavy. After the meeting ended, Thomas returned to his post, feeling the weight of many eyes on him. He knew Camilla was setting a trap. She wanted to make him look suspicious so she could demand control over the Queen's belongings. That evening, Prince Rowan called Thomas privately to his study. The prince looked troubled. "Thomas, I have known you for many years. My mother trusted you deeply, but Lady Camilla has raised concerns. She says you have kept something hidden from the family. Is it true?" Thomas hesitated but decided to speak honestly. "Your Highness, the late Queen left me a letter. In it, she mentioned a diary that holds her true wishes. I have kept it safe until the council's decision." Rowan's eyes widened. "A diary? Why was I not told?" "The Queen asked that it remain protected until the right time," Thomas explained. "She feared it might be misused." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "My mother always had her reasons." I trust you, Thomas. But this diary must be handled carefully. If Camilla finds out, she will not stop. Thomas nodded. I understand, Your Highness. The next few days passed in silence, but it was a silence filled with unease. Camilla stayed mostly in her chambers, planning her next move. She sent quiet messages to her relatives outside the palace, asking for their support. Rumors began spreading in the city that the royal guard was hiding part of the queen's will. Inside the palace, the tension grew so strong that even the youngest servants avoided the main halls. Commander Harris met with Thomas every evening to discuss how to keep the diary safe. They decided to move it to a different location, one that no one would suspect. Late one night, when most of the palace slept, Thomas and Harris carried the locked box containing the diary to the old tower beside the royal chapel. Few people went there anymore, and only guards held the keys. They placed the box behind a stone panel and sealed it carefully. When the task was done, Harris looked at Thomas. The Queen trusted you for a reason. Do not let fear control your heart, he said. Thomas nodded silently. He knew danger was near, but he also knew that truth always finds a way to come out. As dawn broke, a carriage rolled into the palace courtyard. Inside it sat a messenger from the royal council. He carried a sealed letter addressed to Prince Rowan. The letter contained the date for the final reading of Queen Helena's true will. The news spread quickly through the palace. Thomas felt relief, believing the truth would finally be revealed. But when Camilla heard it, her face turned pale. She knew that if the Queen's secret wishes came out, her plans could be ruined. And so, as bells rang across Belchester Palace, both Thomas and Camilla prepared for what was to come. One held the truth in his hands, and the other was ready to do anything to hide it. The palace, once a home of peace, was now standing on the edge of a quiet storm. The day of the council's meeting finally arrived. The air around Belchester Palace felt heavy with tension. Every corridor was cleaned, every candle was lit, and every guard stood firm in his place. It was not an ordinary day. The late Queen Helena's true will was to be read before the royal family and council members. What had been whispered in secret for weeks would now come to light. Thomas woke up early that morning. He polished his uniform carefully and checked every piece of his armor. He knew this day might change everything. As he stood near the window of the guard's chamber, he could see the carriages arriving one after another. The sound of horses and wheels filled the courtyard. Inside the palace, servants moved quickly, carrying trays of tea and folders of documents. Commander Harris entered the room and looked at Thomas with a steady expression. It is time, he said quietly. Bring the Queen's diary. The council must see it, Thomas nodded. He walked to the old tower near the royal chapel where they had hidden the box. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows as he unlocked the stone panel. The box was still there, untouched. He picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of history in his hands. When he returned to the main hall, everyone was already seated. Prince Rowan sat at the center, dressed in formal black, his face calm but thoughtful. Lady Camilla sat beside him, wearing a graceful white gown and a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. Around them were members of the royal council, advisors, and a few high officials. Sir Bennet, the royal archivist, stood with several documents in his hands. We gather today to honor the final wishes of our beloved Queen Helena, he began. Her service to this kingdom was unmatched, and her guidance continues even through her last words. Camilla raised her chin slightly, pretending to listen with interest. She had practiced her expression carefully, hoping no one would guess the nervousness she felt inside. The first part of the Queen's official will was read aloud. It described how her crown jewels would be displayed in the National Museum, how her estate would be divided among charities, and how her personal belongings would remain in the royal palace. Nothing surprising was mentioned until Sir Bennet paused. He looked at Thomas. Before her passing, the Queen also left a private letter addressed to her guard, Thomas. It mentions another document, a diary, containing her personal thoughts and wishes. With the council's permission, this diary will now be presented. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Thomas as he stepped forward and placed the box on the long oak table. He opened it carefully and revealed the small leather-bound diary wrapped in blue silk. Camilla's smile faded for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. A diary? She said softly. Surely it contains personal notes, not legal instructions, Sir Bennet replied calmly. We shall see, my lady. He opened the diary and began to read the first few pages. The Queen's familiar handwriting flowed beautifully across the paper. The words spoke of her gratitude for her people, her love for her son, and her hopes for the future of the kingdom. Then near the end came the lines that silenced the entire hall. I, Queen Helena of Belchester, wish that my personal estate, including the properties and collections I acquired in my lifetime, be placed in the care of my grandson, young Prince Leo, until he comes of age. I trust my loyal guard Thomas to protect these possessions until that time. No one else shall claim authority over them, not even through marriage or title. A soft gasp spread across the room. Camilla's eyes widened slightly, and her hand tightened on the armrest of her chair. Prince Rowan looked down, clearly surprised but not angry. The council members whispered among themselves. Sir Bennet closed the diary gently. The Queen's wishes are clear, he said. Her personal estate is to be protected for young Prince Leo. Lady Camilla, this means that until the boy is grown, you have no direct claim to any of the Queen's possessions. Camilla tried to speak, but her voice trembled slightly. This is unfair, she said. The Queen wrote this in secret. How do we even know this diary is genuine? Bennet lifted his head. The handwriting has been verified by the Royal Archives. It matches every previous document written by the Queen herself. Camilla's face turned pale, but she forced a smile. Then perhaps she was misled. People can influence even the wisest minds. At that moment, Commander Harris stepped forward. My lady, the diary was sealed and hidden under direct royal instruction. It was guarded according to her written order. No one influenced it. The hall grew tense again. Prince Rowan stood slowly, his voice steady but serious. Enough, my mother's words must be respected. She trusted Thomas and the council to protect her wishes. That is what we shall do. Camilla lowered her eyes. As you wish, my husband, she said softly, but her tone carried quiet anger. After the meeting ended, everyone left the hall except Thomas, Harris, and Rowan. The prince turned to Thomas and placed a hand on his shoulder. You have done my mother proud, he said. She always believed in your loyalty. Thomas bowed deeply. It was my duty, Your Highness. When Thomas left the hall, he felt relief for the first time in weeks. The Queen's wishes were safe and truth had prevailed. But deep inside, he knew Camilla was not one to accept defeat easily. Later that evening, the palace was quiet again. The golden sunset covered the towers with soft light. Thomas walked through the garden, feeling the cool air. Everything seemed peaceful, but that peace did not last long. A young page ran toward him breathlessly. Sir, Lady Camilla requests to see you, the boy said. Thomas hesitated but agreed. He followed the boy to one of the side chambers near the east wing. Camilla was standing near the window, her face calm and her voice smooth. You must be proud of yourself, she said. The whole council listened to you today. Thomas stood straight. I only spoke the truth, my lady. Camilla turned to face him. Truth can be a matter of power. You have power now, whether you realize it or not. But power can be dangerous when used without wisdom. Thomas met her eyes firmly. The Queen trusted me to protect her wishes. That is all I will ever do. Camilla walked closer, her voice still soft. And what if protecting those wishes harms the royal family? What if your loyalty blinds you? Thomas replied, Loyalty never blinds, my lady. It protects. For a moment, silence filled the room. Camilla studied his face, realizing she could not sway him. You will regret this, she said finally, turning away. The council may believe you now, but time changes everything. Thomas bowed slightly. Then time will show the truth once more. He left the chamber quietly. Camilla stood by the window, watching him go. Her calm expression slowly faded, replaced by frustration. She knew she had lost this battle, but in her mind, the war was not over. That night, as the moon shone over Belchester Palace, the royal guard stood watch at every gate. The Queen's diary was returned to the archives under strict protection. Thomas remained near the courtyard, his hand resting on his sword, his heart steady. He did not know what Lady Camilla would plan next, but he knew that whatever came, he would face it with the same loyalty he had given to the Queen. Somewhere above, in the quiet of the royal chapel, the bells rang softly, as if the late Queen herself was watching and blessing those who had chosen truth over pride. The days following the council meeting passed quietly, but the air in Belchester Palace remained tense. Servants whispered in corners, and even the youngest pages felt the weight of expectation. Lady Camilla no longer openly challenged the council, but her eyes always watched Thomas. She had been defeated in the court, but she was determined to find another way to influence the estate. Thomas returned to his duties with steady resolve. Every morning he patrolled the halls, checking each corridor, each chamber, ensuring that the Queen's diary and possessions remained safe. He moved with calm confidence, knowing he was protecting the true wishes of Queen Helena. Commander Harris often walked beside him, advising and observing quietly. Prince Rowan seemed relieved. He spent more time with his young son, Prince Leo, teaching him about the history of the kingdom and the importance of honesty and kindness. Thomas often observed them from a distance, smiling quietly. The Queen's wishes had been honored, and her grandson would grow up learning the values she had held dear. One afternoon, Thomas noticed a small gathering near the east wing of the palace. Camilla had invited a few influential friends and minor officials. She spoke softly, as if sharing secrets, while her companions nodded politely. Thomas observed from a distance, understanding that she was trying to regain influence through persuasion rather than force. Later, as evening approached, Camilla approached Prince Rowan. Her face carried a calm, almost sorrowful expression. "My husband," she said gently, "I know the Queen's wishes are clear and I will respect them. But I hope you know that I only wish the best for our family." Prince Rowan looked at her carefully. "I know your words, Camilla, but actions matter more than words. The Queen entrusted Thomas and me with her legacy. That must be our priority." Camilla lowered her eyes, a small smile forming. "Of course. I will obey the Queen's wishes." Thomas, who had been nearby, felt a wave of relief. He knew that for now the palace was safe. The diary and the Queen's possessions were secure, and Camilla's influence had been reduced. But he also understood that patience and vigilance were necessary to maintain order. That night, Thomas returned to the guardroom and opened the box containing the diary. He studied the Queen's words again, feeling the weight of her trust. Every line reminded him why he had chosen a life of service and loyalty. He carefully placed the diary back in its safe spot in the archives, locking it with multiple keys. Commander Harris entered quietly. "You have done well, Thomas," he said. "The Queen's trust in you was not misplaced. You have protected her legacy with honor." Thomas nodded, feeling both pride and humility. "It was my duty, sir. She believed in honesty and loyalty, and I will continue to honor that." The next morning, a royal announcement was made. The council confirmed that all of Queen Helena's personal estate would remain under the protection of the royal family, and specifically Prince Leo, until he reached adulthood. The palace staff celebrated quietly, knowing that the Queen's wishes had been followed faithfully. Camilla listened to the announcement silently, her face carefully composed, but her disappointment was clear to those who watched her closely. Over the following weeks, Thomas noticed a change in Camilla. She no longer attempted to interfere directly with the Queen's estate. Instead, she focused on social events and charitable appearances, maintaining her image in the public eye. Though she still carried pride and ambition, her attempts to take control of the Queen's possessions had been stopped. One afternoon, Thomas walked through the palace gardens and found Prince Rowan sitting on a bench with Prince Leo in his lap. The young boy laughed as Rowan gently taught him a simple song about the kingdom's history. Thomas stopped and smiled quietly. The sight reminded him of the Queen's wisdom. She had planned for her grandson to grow up surrounded by love, learning responsibility and kindness. Prince Rowan looked up and noticed Thomas. "Good morning, Thomas," he said warmly. "Come, sit with us for a moment." Thomas joined them, watching the young prince's bright eyes and curious smile. "Your Highness, he is growing quickly," Thomas said. Rowan laughed softly. "Yes, and he is learning from the best. My mother would be proud to see him." Thomas bowed his head slightly. "Indeed, Your Highness, her trust and wishes have guided us well." As days turned into weeks, the palace gradually returned to a peaceful rhythm. The guards continued their duties, the staff moved efficiently through the corridors, and the public remained unaware of the quiet battle that had taken place behind the palace doors. One evening, Thomas stood on the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the city and the palace gardens. He felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had protected the Queen's legacy. her wishes were preserved, and her family, especially young Prince Leo, would benefit from her wisdom and love. Camilla, standing in her private chamber, gazed at the same sunset. Though she had been defeated in her attempt to claim the estate, she realized that direct confrontation and force could not achieve her goals. She sighed softly, acknowledging that the Queen's wishes would remain intact. Meanwhile, Prince Rowan continued to guide his son with patience and care. He often invited Thomas to join them in the garden, seeking his advice and appreciating his loyalty. Thomas found joy in watching the young prince learn and grow, understanding that the Queen's foresight had secured the future of the royal family. Months later, during a special ceremony in the palace courtyard, Prince Leo was presented to the public as the official guardian of his grandmother's estate. The ceremony was filled with joy and celebration. Citizens cheered, guards stood proudly, and Thomas felt a quiet pride in his heart. He had fulfilled the trust given to him by Queen Helena, and justice had been preserved. Camilla attended the ceremony as a guest, maintaining her composed demeanor. Though she had wanted control, she showed respect for the Queen's wishes and the young prince's position. Over time, she learned that influence and leadership came not from force or greed, but from wisdom, patience, and respect. That evening, after the celebrations ended, Thomas walked through the palace corridors one last time for the day. Every portrait, every piece of furniture, every decoration reminded him of the Queen's life and her values. He understood that true loyalty was not just about guarding objects or following orders, but about preserving the spirit and trust of those who had placed their faith in him. As he stood in the royal garden under the moonlight, Thomas smiled quietly. The palace was safe, the Queen's wishes honored, and the young prince's future secure. Lady Camilla had been defeated in her attempt to claim what did not belong to her, but she still remained part of the family. The balance of the palace had been restored through honesty, loyalty, and courage. And in the quiet of the night, as the palace lights shimmered and the stars reflected above, Thomas felt that the Queen's spirit was still watching, approving the choices of those who had honored her legacy. The story of courage, trust, and justice would be remembered in Belchester for generations to come. The royal guard had fulfilled his duty. The palace, the estate, and the young prince were safe, and Queen Helena's memory would continue to inspire loyalty, kindness, and wisdom in everyone who called Belchester their home.